big and meaty or light and fruity? What makes this beast? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dram Talk. I'm Brad.
And I'm Daniel. And today we will be looking at the Mortlach 12, the wee Witchie. So going to speyside for this episode.
Yeah, and I mean, the wee Witchie might be a tad late for Halloween, but here we are anyway.
Just a little bit behind the punch there, but hey, we'll get there eventually. So, just to kick this episode off, what's been going on, Brad? It's been a while since we've recorded, and by a while I mean like a week. It seems like a while to not have had a dram with you.
Yeah. Has it been a week? I think it's been more than a week. But I think just like the way these episodes come out, I guess for you guys, it's kind of like, oh, well, it hasn't been that long. But
Just been a couple of days. But yeah, for us, it's been probably over a week.
For me, like, what's been going on? Well, like I saw recently there's like an event or festival going on in the Rocks here in Sydney.
Oh, yeah.
It's like Whisky on the
Rocks.
Yeah, Whisky on the Rocks. So those of you that don't know, if you're Sydney based, from the 19th of November through to the 22nd of November. So a whole lot of things going on there. You can go through, taste a whole bunch of different scotches, different whiskies, and there'll be a lot of different, I think, ambassadors from different distilleries there. Cool. So it's like a whole like experience of just going through and, you know, sharing the experience of this liquid that we all love with other like-minded people. So I think that's something that we're really interested in going to, right?
Yeah, very keen to, especially now that, I mean, like, if you are in Sydney and interested in attending, just be careful being out and about, you know, always maintain safe social distancing in this COVID world. But, I mean, since we've really got into whiskey and started up this podcast, this is going to be one of our first opportunities to actually go to a whiskey event. So pretty keen to do that. Pretty keen to head out there, try some different whiskeys, hopefully meet some new people, get some new listeners. We'll see what happens, but very keen for that. It's coming up.
Yeah, we'll see where the dram takes us.
And as for me, the only newest thing in my whiskey world is I secured a new bottle.
Oh, yes, that's true. That's true. Yes.
Just pulled out the Cragganmore 12.
Yeah, I almost forgot.
Special release.
I almost forgot you got that.
So, I mean, it's not going to be featured on this episode. Brought it over for you to try, Brad, but it'll be appearing in a future episode.
Yeah, in an episode near you, ladies and gentlemen. But not just yet.
Not just yet. And I guess the other thing we've got to bring up today before we get into the Mortlach is going to have a new, I wouldn't say segment, but a new element to Dram Talk. So I'm going to be introducing the Dram Talk whiskey tin. So I've brought in my Lafroig 10-year-old tin. I chose this one because that bottle's nearing its end. So this is going to be a tin that's going to be free very soon. But I figured this would be something we could introduce as like an ongoing thing in our podcast where, you know, if one of us makes a stupid mistake, says something stupid, screws something up, knocks their glass against the microphone, we can just tell them to tin it.
Or maybe, you know, they get given a list that they have to make of only 5 and then they go 6 or 7, right? That's probably something else we should add into that.
Yeah. You know what? Maybe like if someone can go an episode without referencing Oban, maybe I won't punish them. But if you bring it up, it's going in the tin. So by going in the tin, we mean we'll probably use, I guess, like poker chips or something just to represent each other. And each of those chips will equate to about $5. And then every couple of weeks, we'll open the tin, see how much money we've got in there, and we'll use that to buy a bottle to review for the pod. It'll be like a Dram Talk produced bottle, like not purchased by one of us individually, but purchased for the pod.
Yeah, and more so we'll probably be more inclined to using it for listener recommendations, which we still have a few that we have to go back through.
Yeah.
That we just haven't had the opportunity to purchase yet. So this is probably a good way for us to actually get back to those.
Yeah. And like as we go on, we might introduce different elements into the pod that'll contribute to this. So one of the ones I was thinking is we could like we won't do it today, but we'll start to introduce like a mystery dram. So that's where one of us will take turns like alternating it. One of us will pick a whiskey that we've previously reviewed, pour a little taster, give it to the other. And if they can't guess what one they've already tried and reviewed, then they're going to have to put money in the tin.
Well, I already feel that you'll be contributing to the tin a lot more than I will because we're going to have these lists. I'm going to pump these lists out. And I already know you're not going to be able to stick to it. So, you know, I think I'm safe.
I'm just going to dangle potential Oban quotes out there. And then every time you mention Oban, you're going to have to put money in the tin. Okay, so that's the news for Dram Talk and what's going on for us.
Yeah,
so
it's like probably the latest update for us, yeah?
Yeah, let's get into the episode. So Mortlach, it's located in Dufftown, which is in Speyside. So just to give everyone, I guess, like another edition of our crash courses into the whiskey regions, we'll briefly talk about Speyside. So this is like by far the largest whiskey region. It hasn't always been. I did find out recently that Campbellton was actually one of the like highest whiskey production regions in Scotland.
Okay,
It had
yeah.
about over 30 distilleries at one point, although they weren't too fussed with producing like a solid quality product. So customers ended up not purchasing them. Didn't last too long, and now they're down to about 2 or 3. I think it's about 3 distilleries there now.
Yeah, I don't even think it feels your hand.
Yeah, no, so like a really big fall from grace for them there. But Speyside is like the largest whiskey region by distillery count. It's like smallest by size almost.
Yeah.
Well, no, not smallest by size because you got Isla, but it's like a tiny region, and it's called Speyside because all of these distilleries are located near or along the River Spey, which runs kind of on the eastern side of Scotland. I don't know if you're familiar with the Scottish map or if you already know what the region looks like. It's kind of like northeast on like it's a little cut in on Scotland. It's kind of like the top part there near Aberdeen. So the oldest distillery in this region is Strathyla. They started around 1786. And the most popular one would probably be Glenfiddich.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say probably.
It definitely
I'd say definitely. It's just Glenfiddich's everywhere. You can't go to a liquor store without seeing Glenfiddich there.
Yeah.
I think it's just impossible at this point.
Yeah, and they've got so many different editions. Like it's crazy how widespread they are. And then the common flavor profiles you're looking at in this region, they're usually characterized as more lighter and sweeter than other regions. They've got like really fruity, sweet, spicy, and vanilla notes. So really that nice, pleasant, enjoyable, easy drinking drams. Yeah, so they're the common notes you'd find. However, with over 50 distilleries there, you're bound to find quite a bit of variation in those notes with what the distilleries are able to play out. And I think we see that with the Mortlach here.
Yeah, so let's just get into like the history of Mortlach itself. So the Mortlach distillery was founded in 1823 and it actually lays claim to being the first legal distillery in Dufftown, Speyside. So if you don't know, that was a really big deal at the time due to the large amount of illicit activity occurring around the site. So a lot of, I guess, illegal trade of spirits and liquor going on.
I mean, only classified illegal because the man who was making money off the taxes wasn't approving of it. But
yeah, now the Mortlach distillery was dubbed as the Beast of Dufftown by Dave Broom, and it's always said to defy what Speyside whiskies are known for. So it's a spirit which is often referred to as being thick, rich, muscular, meaty, umami-led, and savory.
So very, very different from those fruity, sweet vanilla notes.
Yeah, so I think that's why it was so appropriate to have the crash course at the start of our Mortlach episode.
Yeah.
So we can have like a real big contrast.
Yeah, so like this is what the region is. However, we're not going to show you one of the characteristic quintessential Speyside drams. We're kind of going on the other end.
I mean, if you're familiar with the pod, that's how we've always kind of done it. We're just super unconventional.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's what we are. And that singular character itself of the distillery of being muscular and meaty and savory is really the result of their pretty unique 2.81 distillation process.
2.81? That is a very specific description of how many times that whiskey has been distilled.
Yeah, and that process was started in 1896 by the distiller's son, Dr. Alexander Cowie. And he's still in use to this day. And for a long time as well, in the distillery's history, they never really had an official bottling. And the closest thing they had to that were just a series of licensed releases by Gordon and MacPhail. And they had a 16-year-old bottle, which was part of the Flora and Fauna range. Then in 2002...
Sorry, just to jump in there for Australian listeners, if you're a member of the Whisky Club, you'd know we've got a Dalwayne 16, which is part of the Flora and Fauna range as well. Yeah. Thoroughly enjoyed that one. So,
yeah, then in 2002, the first official bottling was released, which was a 19-year-old manager's dram. Then in 2005, a 32-year-old was released. So you can kind of see they're just coming in with these big age statements straight away.
Yeah, really, really prestigious
yeah.
whiskies.
Then going into 2009, a 12-year-old was added.
Thank God, something within our price range.
Yeah. Then that takes us to today, where the official range of bottlings offered by the distillery are a 12, 16, and 20-year-old, with a 26-year-old, which is actually part of the Diageo special releases for 2019.
That one that was sitting at about, what, 2.5 to 3 grand?
Yeah. Then, as well as that, they have a 15-year-old, which is part of the Diageo Game of Thrones collection.
So they make a regular appearance in Diageo's special releases. And I don't know whether that comes down to, I guess, the fact that they offer a different expression from Speyside, or the fact that they have a distillation process that's quite distinct from other whiskies you'd usually find. So how can you tell us how they distill it 2.81 times?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, that meaty characteristic was drawn out by that really unique distillation process. Now, some other notable scotches that, well, triple distill, I mean, not exactly triple distill, 2.81, are Springbank and Ben Rhines.
And so do a few of the lowland distilleries, like I know Auchentoshan and Glenkinchie. They do triple distillation as well.
Yeah, and it's very commonplace in Irish single malt and Irish whiskey as well.
Yeah, so with that whole distillation process, I know it's done differently depending on where you're at, but what that distillation process is it removes a lot of impurities from the liquid itself. However, it can also impact the expressions and flavors that come from the grains. So that's the downside to it. The upside to it is that it does create a much more smoother, solid mouthfeel.
Yeah, but, since we have the Mortlach here, I'm going to try and break down and condense this 2.81 process.
Yeah.
And it's going to be like really, really condensed. Okay, so let's go. Let's get into it.
Let's do it.
So first off, Mortlach have 6 stills of various shapes and sizes. And I know what you're probably thinking. This is a bit weird. Like, why are they all different sizes? What's going on? I'd want to see a bit of uniform.
Yeah, and I know if you've been to a distillery
Yeah.
tour, you normally see like rows of their kind of copper stills, and they all look the same. They all look the same size.
Yeah, but Mortlach do things a bit differently. They're all different shapes and sizes. And you know what? That's probably part of the magic, right? So 2 of those 6 operate in the conventional way. So one being a wash still, carrying the first distillate, and the second is the spirit still, carrying the second distillation.
So most Scotch whiskies are distilled twice, and they go through this process.
Yeah. Then this pair almost work in unison, creating one spirit stream. Then out of the 4 stills left, 2 are wash stills and the other 2 are spirit stills. So the 2 wash stills carry out that first distillation for the second and third spirit streams. Then what these 2 wash stills produce is then split between the 2 spirit stills. So 80% will go into one spirit still, creating that second spirit stream. And then that last 20%, which is actually weaker, goes into the last still, which is aptly what this bottle today is named after, which is the Witchie. And that third and final spirit still is the smallest, appropriately named, right? Witchie. And it's actually so integral to the distillery when it comes to producing that distinct, weighty, and meaty characteristic that Mortlach are really renowned for. Now, going back to that last 20%, it's distilled in the Witchie itself 3 times, and the middle cut is taken after the third distillation, creating the third and final spirit stream. Once complete, these 3 spirit streams are combined in worm condenser tubs. Then they create this meaty spirit known as the Beast of Dufftown. So
Science.
yes, science. Now, again, I just really want to reiterate that was super condensed, super streamlined of that actual process, and it goes into so much more detail, but it can get pretty confusing when you don't have diagrams to actually follow.
Yeah, so if you're interested in it and want to know a little bit more about the distillation process, and especially the one that Mortlach operates, I highly recommend watching a video or looking at something that has accompanying diagrams, because it just makes it so much clearer.
Yeah, no, not only that, it's so intriguing as well, and it's really worth looking into. And I mean, even if you purchase a bottle of the Witchie here, you'll have like a diagram on the side of the bottle. Well, not the bottle, the actual box. Yeah. And it will have like a nice little diagram of the actual distillation process.
Cool. You get to learn a little something. There's more to whiskey collecting than just buying alcohol to drink. You get to learn.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that's really a lot of talk, right?
Oh yeah.
Probably the most talk we've ever had before we got into something. So let's crack this open. Let's get into it.
Okay, like looking at the Mortlach, like they've got such a nice bottle. I mean, it looks so regal. It's really cool.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah.
And now, I guess, what are you saying? Like, first impressions looking at it, it's a 12-year-old. It's bottled at 43.4 ABV. At 43%, I would almost say it's probably been chill filtered.
Yeah.
And looking at the color for a 12-year-old, probably saying it's not natural color.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's natural color, but just going off the casks as well. It's an ex-sherry cask and an ex-bourbon cask.
Okay, so you do expect more of that kind of dark, deep caramel color.
So far, Dale and I have really enjoyed whiskeys finished off in sherry casks.
Yeah.
So, I mean, whenever we see sherry cask, we're almost like we already know. We're inclined to have a preference to it, and we're probably going to enjoy the experience that we have.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. Like, sherry casks are by far, like, probably one of my more favorite flavor imparting casks out there. And yeah, it just creates like that kind of really nice, what do you call them? Like fruits, spices, as well as like a nice sweetness to it too. That's more than the sugary caramelly vanilla that commonly comes across from a bourbon cask.
I mean, it's funny as well because I remember when you first had a sherry cask whiskey, which was that Glenallachie, right?
Okay, so that wasn't the first sherry cask one because I mean,
Yeah.
like Lager 16, I'm pretty sure that's aged in
Oh,
sherry
true.
casks.
That's true. Yeah.
But this was the first. That was the first. Well, not the first. That was since we started collecting the whiskies. That was the first speyside one I got, and it was aged in sherry casks. So that kind of played into the fact that I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it because I was very much in the mindset of like, I want peat.
Yeah.
And then
because I remember when you first had that bottle, you were just like, I don't like it at all. But then now, like the Glenallachie, especially that 15, it's firmly like a bottle that we both thoroughly enjoy.
yeah, and it's just made me so keen to explore Glenallachie's range, and it's probably one of my favorite speyside distilleries.
Yeah, and just going back to this Mortlach, I know Daniel mentioned like the bottle is so, I guess, regal looking. It just looks really, really nice. And what's great about this bottle as well is it's not at that standard 700 mils. That's 750 mils.
Get a little bit extra.
You get a
little
little
bit more
bit
bang for the
extra.
buck.
Yeah, so what's that? I think you get an extra 2 grams out of that. How good's that?
Okay, so what are our impressions on the nose?
I think the first thing on the nose is you can already tell this is not as sweet as a regular speyside is.
Yeah, it's savory in comparison.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there is a sweetness there, but it's nothing when you compare it to other speysides we've looked at. Like instantly you can say nothing compared to the Glen Grant 15.
No.
Maybe that's not a fair comparison as well, but just going off of a more recent speyside that I can recall, nowhere near comparison.
Now, like Brad did mention, we have tried this before. However, this is probably the first proper experience I've had with it because our first try was at a party we were at and we drank it out of a plastic cup.
Classy as always.
So not the preferred way to drink whiskey, to experience whiskey. But hey, anyways, a good way when it's good whiskey.
Yeah, and even then, even in that plastic cup, it was a pretty good experience.
It really was. Yeah, I did thoroughly enjoy it.
Yeah, so I mean, we have actually been we've been looking forward to this one.
So I mean, like as we mentioned, straight off on the nose, very distinct and different from Speysides, mainly through the fact that it has more of a savory, borderline like a salt. Not quite as salty as an island dram, but like a borderline salty note to it. But then underlying that, you've got some of the typical Speyside notes. Like there's a little bit of fruitiness there. It's possibly bordering on like an orange as well when you combine it with that savory saltiness.
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, definitely on the nose, definitely rich, very full on the nose. Then,
like it almost, yeah, you're right. It almost, when you're smelling it, you can tell it's going to be a very substantial dram. It's like it feels thick.
yeah, you can tell that straight away. Whereas, like as we mentioned before in the crash course, a Speyside's typically light.
Yeah.
This, you can already tell on the nose, it's not going to be a light dram. I mean, I can almost get like a little baking spice as well on the nose. Very light though. Now as well, I think even before we get into the taste of this one, it notes on the box itself that add water or ice to reveal the true Mortlach character. So we are going to have to really pay attention to when we palette this one, how it stacks up with the addition of water. Because, I mean, that's a
Bold claim.
That's a bold claim to put on your box.
Yeah.
Like, to
And
reveal...
especially one at 43.4%. Like adding a little bit of water is obviously going to knock that down to below 40. So it's interesting that you'd state that.
Yeah, maybe not even below 40, but close
to 40.
You're getting close to that 40%, yeah. But I don't know. I do enjoy the nose on this one.
Yeah.
I even get like a bit of a toffee.
I was going to say there's almost like a toffee or a fudge. Let's get onto the palate. Let's get onto the palate.
Yeah, let's get into it. I'll say immediately, very robust.
Yep.
Not a light dram. I wouldn't say it's not friendly, because it kind of is.
Mm-hmm.
It's still...
Yep.
It's still got that welcoming nature of a speyside. But the real point of difference is, like I said, it's robust. It's not light.
Yeah, and it's got not quite an oily texture, but more of like a waxy texture in the mouth. Like,
Yeah,
it's
I can
not
see
one
that.
that disappears really fast. It kind of just like sits there.
Yeah, it's almost similar to that experience of the Urban 21, where it completely coated the palate, but not in an oily way.
Yeah.
Because it's still a very dry dram.
Yeah.
But definitely on the palate, the sweetness that was very light on the nose is almost non-existent on the palate.
Yeah, yeah, it is. There is still kind of, I guess, yeah, there is still a Speyside-esque influence there. And I would say it's more attributed to the sherry cask, because what I'm finding is almost like a cherry ripe as well. Like,
Okay, yeah.
borderline dark chocolates, and that fruit is borderline the cherry as well that you're getting in that, which is, it's kind of sitting in addition to that umami flavor. It's weird. It's like coming in different waves.
Yeah, and that's probably that Mortlach meatiness, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's carrying 2 packs of flavor that you wouldn't necessarily put together in a speyside.
Yeah, it's interesting because it is a very full dram. Like, it is a very meaty dram. Like, they've got that completely right. Like, people consume whiskey the way you want. I do normally appreciate it like just on its own with no like accompanying food or snacks, but this one's almost like making me full as well. Like, I feel like I'm getting a meal in addition to it.
Yeah, and I'm finding on the finish as well, I'd say medium. It's a medium finish, but definitely dry, definitely smooth. But I'm also kind of getting almost like a plum aftertaste.
Okay. Yeah, the spices sit with me at the end. Like those kind of baking spices, but also almost borderline like the spices in a mulled wine. Like those kind of really dry spices. Yeah, I mean it's a good one to have, especially if you're doing a tasting, because like the finish stays with you long enough to appreciate it, but then it disappears and you're not left with it still in your mouth.
Yeah.
Like you'd almost wouldn't need a palate cleanser before going on to the next dram.
Yeah. And I think I'm finding as well, like so far as I'm going through and experiencing different scotches, I'm really enjoying drams that have a medium finish.
Yep.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I do love a long finish, but those medium finishes, they just sit so well.
They do. It's obviously more preferable to a short or a
Yeah.
light finish when it's just like disappeared at the moment you've tried it. You're like, well, now I need to take another sip, another sip, and another sip, and now my dram's empty. I guess I'll pour another one.
Yeah.
Whereas this is like, it's good. You get to enjoy it and appreciate it, but then you can move on. Should we put its claim to the test? Should we try adding a little bit of water?
Maybe let's give it a little bit more.
A little bit more?
Give it a little bit more. As it's been sitting in the glass, like on the nose as well, I can almost get a almond note, but not just like a plain almond note, like a toasted almond.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, that fruitiness is coming across a little bit more to me now with time in the glass. It's more of like the dark fruits, like you said, like a plum, cherry, maybe even some dark forest berries.
Yeah, even accompanying that, I'm getting a bit of a raisin as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm really loving how much this has to unpack in it.
Yeah, and one of my favorite things about it is the finish, like that nice, dry, spiced finish. It's not sweet, it's not sticky, it's not oily, and it's also not short or flat. It's just like a really nice finish.
And I think we're both really enjoying dry whiskeys as well.
Mm.
I don't know if that's been amplified by how much we enjoyed the Open 21, but these dry drams There's something about them. I don't know.
There is. And just another point, like you've mentioned Oban twice now in this episode, unprompted. So that's 10.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're really right. And I think it's just a nature of our palate. And I think it does make sense, especially coming from the fact that we are more inclined to peated whiskies. This offers, I guess, like a good compromise between the lighter, sweeter, fruitier notes to cater to those kind of palates. So I know when I was going to the shops really early on in the podcast days, I was like super into peated whiskies. It was like all I wanted to buy. Like I didn't even want to look at another region because I just had my eyes and mind and heart open and set to peated Islay whiskies. But exploring these a little bit more, unpacking the Glenallachie, going into the Highlands, trying the Mortlach, like finding like there are whiskies out there, there are scotches out there from the different regions that are catering to that palate, and I'm just keen to try a whole bunch of others. Like I'm keen to get into the Glenallachie's range. I'm keen to try the Abelard Abuna.
Yeah.
Like the Whiskey Club has a new one coming out, which we'd probably have our hands on by the time this episode airs.
Yeah.
But really keen to get into that one and to explore some of these highly acclaimed whiskies that do, I guess, like offer you that nice in between from like the not the super sweet and light drams to the super heavy and smoky ones.
Yeah, and I think as well, even just our time with bourbon, it's been brief on the pod, but not so brief outside of the pod.
Yeah.
But it's made us even more appreciative of the oaky notes and the oaky characteristics present in Scotch. Whereas you might not necessarily like that bite that oak can give to a Scotch.
Yeah.
But having tried bourbon where it's so present and so prominent in the flavor profile itself, especially in what we experienced and tried ourselves,
Yeah.
I just appreciate it a lot more now.
Yeah, and I would almost recommend that to listeners who are wanting to explore and expand their palate when it comes to trying different whiskies. Is like if you're looking at bottles that are been aged in ex-bourbon and ex-sherry casks, go out and try those products because one, loved bourbon. I've tried sherry, a little bit sweet for my liking, but it does carry those really nice fruity spiced notes, and it's like the raisin is very strong in sherry. And I found after that, coming back to some of the sherry aged whiskies, like it's like you've almost got a new appreciation for it because you know where they're coming from and you can see how those flavors have been passed on through this casking and maturation process. And that's just like you're just going to be able to like draw out a lot more when you know what the original products actually contained.
Yeah, exactly. It's a big part of it. Go back in the production process. Try the things that are making up the Scotch. And
Just pull a branch off an oak tree and just gnaw on it.
No, but those things will help inform
Yeah, they will.
your palate and help inform your mindset as well when you're going into different whiskey, and it'll just open up and broaden your horizons. Because like even as Daniel mentioned about how he was so ingrained in Islay, but now it's more, when you walk into the store, it's not such a straight beeline to the Islay whiskies. It's more of a, I'll get there eventually.
I know that's where I'll end up, but let
Yeah.
me just see if anything else catches my eye on the way.
Yeah. Now, as Daniel said before, and where I said, let's give it a bit more time. You know what? Let's put this to the test. Let's give this a bit of water.
Let's do it.
Now, we've added a teaspoon of water, and even in the Glencairn here, we've added water a lot sooner than we normally do, and I think that's probably more in part to us really wanting to test this out.
Yep. So I've still got half the dram left. Immediately on the nose.
A lot more oaky, right?
A lot more oaky, and the flavors have just opened up incredibly. Like coming in on it early on, it was very savory, I would say very salty, but there was like a salty-esque note to it. One that I would put borderline with an orange peel, but also come out kind of that, I don't know, there's just so many more layers in it now. You've got the fruit, you've got the spices, you've still got that umami savoriness. And there's like an underlying vanilla note as well that I wasn't picking up earlier.
Yeah, that's slowly coming across now. Like a bit more of that sweetness is unraveling.
Just try it on the palate now with the water.
I'm going to say a lot more fruity.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very full and very warm initially before the water. After the water, a lot cooler, a lot more fruity. Still those underlying spices as well.
But the thing that hasn't left is the fullness, the
Yeah.
robust nature. That's still there. And that's pretty impressive for me.
We don't usually see that when you add water, especially one that's bottled at 43%. Yeah, and there's another sweetness as well. I'd put it down to like a fruity sweetness, not like a vanilla or a caramel or a sugar. It's a very light, not a light fruit, but it is a fruity sweetness.
It's very interesting. I mean, dare I say, this is almost as enjoyable with the water as it is without.
I would agree. Yeah.
It could even be even a tad bit better.
You're probably right there.
Yeah.
Like maybe a controversial claim, but also maybe not because they did say it on the box.
Yeah.
So you know what we were kind of expecting it. For it to be the same or worse would have been a little bit of disappointment when they're advertising on the box. Add a bit of water.
Really interesting. And I don't think this isn't the first dram that we've had where we've enjoyed it just as much or more so with the addition of water. I think the first one was definitely the Glenallachie 15.
Yeah.
Because that's one that we definitely pretty much always just add the water in now.
I would always, because that was just incredible how much that changed with it.
Yeah. And I think the second one, I can't remember what the second one was. If there was a second one. I feel like there was.
I mean, I know Talisker 15 definitely did play a big role in how much water can change and strengthen that whiskey.
Yeah. But yeah, I think this might be another one we might have to add to that.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I think on the nose now as well, that light raisin note that I picked up before has picked up a bit more.
Yeah, it's a lot stronger now. There's something toasted as well, which I would probably also attribute to that almond that you were talking about before as well. And it's weird because it's like it was a lot lighter and a lot fruitier, but the finish was still dry and spiced, which I do really enjoy.
Yeah, the finish has still remained, like you said, dry. And what I'm really enjoying is it's been pretty much true to life of what they've stated in the fact that it's robust. Because, you know, like Daniel mentioned, what we'd normally see is adding water will either dilute flavors and really, I guess, really lighten the profile of a whiskey. But what this has done is it's expanded it even more.
Yeah.
And we're packing out different things that we weren't prior.
Yeah, yep, for
So
sure.
it's really great to see that. And I love seeing it. And I mean, just looking at the bottle itself again, now I'm just going to mention pricing as well. Now, when I purchased this, I think I'm almost certain it was $100.
Okay.
And now just going off my initial experiences right now, I'm going to say really, really worth that price tag.
Yeah, I mean, like, depending on where you're sitting at with how much you know and how much you've explored in whiskey, you'd know, like, common speyside, popular ones, whether it be the Glenfiddich, which I think their 12-year-old sits at about $70, $80. And, like, Mortlach is a little bit more prestigious. Like, we've seen that in the special releases that Diageo do. It's usually the most expensive one there.
Yeah.
So to see that kind of sitting at that $100 mark, which I personally think is what I'd look at spending, like on average for a whiskey, like, you know, you're pretty much bound to get something good quality at that cost. So to see that come in at that price, I'm like, that is worth it. I would pay $100 for this. Was that on special or was that?
No. That's what it was. Yeah. So, man, I'm really enjoying it.
Okay, before we finish our dram, let's go on to our segment. Okay, our segment for today. You came up with this one, Brad, so I'll let you intro it.
Right. So, just out of curiosity, what would your whiskey superpower be? Now, this is a superpower that's activated after you consume a dram.
Okay. Does it have to pertain to whiskey? I'd imagine it would. Like, if we're a whiskey podcast, you'd hope it would.
I was going to say, look, it doesn't have to, but that'd just be boring.
Yep.
Give it a bit of a relation to whiskey, right?
Okay.
So what's yours?
My whiskey superpower would be to turn any whiskey I'm drinking into a peated version of that whiskey. So not into a peated whiskey, into a peated version of that whiskey. And that would be like controlling the level of peat. Like, do I want to see this just slightly peated or do I want to see this extremely peated?
Okay, that's a pretty interesting power. It's very similar to mine.
Yep. What's your one?
So mine is just the ability to turn a dram into any dram I want.
Ah, okay. So if you order one and you don't like it, and you're like, really wish I'd ordered that one, you can just turn it into that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's along the lines of yours.
Yeah.
But I guess my one's limitation is that I'm limited to scotch and whiskey that's been made.
Ah, okay. Yep.
Right? So whereas yours is you're pretty
Creating
much
a new-
you're creating new iterations of different scotches and different bottlings.
Yeah, and I guess my one came out of our experience with the Kuba Khan because that was where you had to really fight to find the peat, I found. And I'm like, I would have liked the peat to be a little bit stronger. So I'm like, what if I could just turn that dial up just a little bit more? So I know like a lot of whiskeys have, like a lot of distilleries, and I guess this comes into like tying into our speyside crash course, is a lot of distilleries are actually experimenting with peated variations of their flavor profiles. So you'd usually find not most distilleries, but a lot of distilleries do have a peated version. So you can, because like they're just catering towards people who absolutely love Islay and love peated whiskies. So my one's like, yeah, really'd like to know what would a peated Mortlach 12 wee witchy taste like. I can just try that.
Yeah, and just going off that point you mentioned of people who really love peat.
Yep.
I think as well what I find with a lot of people that are new to scotch or not really, I guess, scotch drinkers, in their mind, what they imagine scotch to be is Islay.
Yep.
And then when they taste an Islay whiskey, they're like, oh God, what the hell
What
is
have
that?
I done?
Yeah. Like they taste the scotch. I thought this was actually more going to be along the lines of a, like a speyside or a Highland or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, I don't know, it's just as whiskey and scotch becomes more and more popular, a lot more people are willing to experiment. So yeah, Daniel and I, we're peat heads. So we are all for non-Islay distilleries experimenting with peat.
Yep.
And I mean, look, we wouldn't have the Cragganmore on the table and up for review in a future episode if we weren't interested in non-Islay distilleries experimenting with peat.
Yeah, because the Cragganmore is a speyside distillery.
Yeah, and we wouldn't have looked at the Kuba Khan if we weren't interested in that.
Yep.
I mean, for us, we're really like on the hunt for that. We're looking out for speyside distilleries, Highland distilleries, Lowland, Campbelltown, whatever. If you're experimenting with peat, we're probably going to try and seek you out.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm like, even like in our previous episode when we looked at Loch Lomond, like they're not advertising their whiskies as peated whiskies, but peat was a tasting note. It was influenced. It was an element of their brand and their whiskies. And so it's really cool to see that because they worked really well. Like we did enjoy each of them to some degree, some more than others. And peat can just add an element to whiskey without completely overpowering it and blowing people's palates out.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, what I'm finding with peat is it's dependent on the person because I don't know. I've just been very lucky with whenever I've introduced peat to people, they've really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's just, again, luck of the draw.
It can be hard to tell because there's no safe bet. Because even in Islay, as we have mentioned, each of the distilleries do carry very distinct variations of peated whiskey. To super simplify it, Lafroig is more of that antiseptic, medicinal, really groundy, earthy peat. Ardbeg, you're getting more of that smokehouse, bonfire, cooked meats kind of peat. Lagavulin, you're more of the smoky, almost seaside-y kind of notes.
Yep.
So it can really depend on the person's palate. So if you know that person's palate well enough, you can essentially choose a whiskey you like, and you can essentially choose a whiskey tailored to their preference, or you can just hope for luck of the draw and hopefully they do enjoy it. But I guess that's where whiskey tastings come in. Like if you can do a variety of tastings, expose people to a selection of them, then they can make up their own mind as to where they go. And maybe we can do an episode on that.
Yeah, definitely. I think I don't know, do we do an episode where, I don't know, we get Aiden back on or we get someone else on and then we just give them different Isla whiskeys to try?
Yeah. Okay. Like, I think we could even do my sister for that episode
Yeah.
because she loves Isla whiskeys. So
Yeah, perfect.
we can get her to try a whole bunch of different ones and then maybe even rank them best
Yeah.
to worst.
Man, and as we've been talking, like just going back to this Mortlach 12 now, I'm really enjoying just how savory it is.
Yeah. It's, oh, man, it's good. Like, I can have some like sweet speyside whiskeys that just leave that really sweet, sugary feel in your mouth. But this is really nice, really savory and spiced. And it's just a really pleasant dram.
Yeah, and I think what I found with this bottle as well is when I was reading the notes, like in the store, and I saw it was like umami lead profile, I was thinking as in my head, I'm like, this is right up your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Because you always mention how much you really dislike the sweeter drams.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not even dislike, but you just don't, you're not inclined.
Yep. My palate leans the other direction.
Yeah, so yeah, this one's just right up your wheelhouse. And it's a speyside as well.
Yep.
So it's almost contradictory, but that's just how it is. And I don't know. And I think as well, like, I think we've mentioned this is probably the third time we're going to mention it now, how nice the bottle looks. But I mean, this would look great on a shelf.
It would look really good on a shelf. Like it is a statement piece. I think like anyone who comes in and sees that bottle, like, damn, that must be special.
Yeah. And as we mentioned, about the price points just a bit earlier, whereas the Glenfiddich sits in that 70 to 80
Yep.
for the 12-year-old. And then if you want to if you want to maybe, puff your collar a little bit, puff your chest out, just get a bottle of this instead.
Yeah.
Because you're going to impress people with it, I think.
I think you will. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Its appearance, I guess, belies the price.
Like look at this. You would expect it to be a pricey whiskey. Okay, I finished my dram. Brad's finished his. Let's do a dram in words before we get onto the ratings. So my dram in words for the Mortlach 12, Witchie. I don't know the time period, but I am walking through a vast and grand library. Like, got the massive shelves that are like floor to ceiling, filled with hardcover, leather-bound books. You're pulling them off the shelf, maybe a little bit dusty, and they're just full of knowledge, and you're just like, damn, this is grand. That's my dram in words.
Yeah, that's pretty good. What am I going to... What do I have for this? Beast of Dufftown. What do I have for the Beast of Dufftown? So, my dram in words. So, I'd say I'm in the desert. It's incredibly dry.
Yep.
Very arid. And I'm just searching for that oasis, for that water. And I'm not really appreciating what's around me at the moment. And then as I cross over that dune and I finally see that oasis, I run. I get there. And as I'm taking in that water, I look around and I can actually start to appreciate the vastness of the landscape and the beauty of the landscape.
Ooh.
So, yeah, I think that's what my dram in words would be. It's having a dry surrounding that you're not really appreciative of. And then once you finally quench your thirst of that and you get a bit of water into you, then you start to look back and appreciate what's around you.
Nice. Very allegorical there, Brad.
Yeah, I think that's mine. So with that, dram in words, that just leaves the ratings, right?
Yes.
Do you want me to start or do you want to start?
You start.
You know what? I'm going to give this a 7.5.
Okay. Yep.
What about you?
My problem with this is because I'm looking back at the other Speysides that I've rated, the Glenallachie 15 and the Glengrant 15. And I think for me to rate this one, I'll have to change my ratings for those.
I see.
So I'm going to rate this one a 7. I've rated the Glenallachie 15 a 7, but I think that deserves an 8. So I want to bump that up. And the Glen Grant 15 then has to move up because I think that was like next level being at cask strength. So I think that has to go to an 8.4.
Okay, that's pretty fair. Like, I'm pretty happy with mine because I know I'm pretty sure I gave the Glenallachie a 7.5 as well.
Yeah.
So
You've put them on par?
Yeah, for me, these are pretty on par. For me, yeah. Even though I really, really enjoyed the Glenallachie 15. But the reason I'd say these are on par is that if I want something a little drier, I'll just pour myself a Mortlach 12. If I want something a little sweeter, a little bit more, I guess, a little more like spicy, that a little more. If I want something a little more sweet, a little bit more of that baking spice, I'll pour
a little
myself
bit like more of a stronger sherry influence.
Yeah, then I'll just pour myself a Glenallachie 15.
Yep.
So that's where I'm kind of at. It's just a real seesaw. It's
Yeah.
just depending which one I want at that given point in time. So for me, they sit pretty evenly.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I would say this one's great. Like, it's well above average, especially for a speyside distillery. So happy with the 7 for that one. And I guess that wraps it up for that episode. Yeah, so thank you for listening. As always, we'll post our... Thank you for listening. In the episode description, you'll see the link to our Linktree account, which will direct you towards our Instagram, our Facebook. I would say also the platforms to listen to this on, but obviously you're already listening to this, so you don't need to be directed there. But if you want to listen to it on a different platform, go ahead. Otherwise, you can reach out to us at dramtalk.au@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your listener recommendations. This Dram Talk whiskey tin is probably going to fill up pretty fast, judging by this episode.
Yeah, definitely.
So we're gonna need to have some bottles to spend this on.
And not only that, if you've tried the Mortlach 12, the Wee Witchie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, let us know.
Are they in line with ours, or are they a little less, a little more? What do you think?
Yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Give us a follow on Instagram, or reach out to us on email. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so with that, ladies and gentlemen,
thank you for listening.
Pour another dram!